Welcome to the Explainer. You know, if you've ever found yourself glued to that little flight tracker on a long international trip, you might have spotted something kind of strange. The exact moment your plane leaves the coast, it inches further up into the atmosphere. Your cruising altitude over the open ocean is deliberately thousands of feet higher than it is over solid land. It's not random, and it's certainly not for the scenery. Over a busy city skyline, flights are kept lower and tightly restricted. But the literal second you cross that shoreline out into the open ocean, boom, planes climb significantly higher, sometimes thousands of feet higher, into completely open airspace. Why the sudden dramatic change? Well, to really understand this, we have to completely rethink what altitude actually means to a pilot. Which brings us to our first major factor, the ultimate survival margin, and what happens when the runways completely disappear. A lot of us just assume a plane picks one cruising height and stubbornly sticks to it for the whole trip, right? But the ocean totally flips that script. It forces airlines to look dead on at a terrifying worst-case scenario. Think about it. What actually happens if an engine fails when you are hundreds or maybe even thousands of miles away from solid ground? The number of safety nets out there. It's a harsh, unforgiving zero. Over land, if things go south, pilots have a whole menu of options. You've got emergency diversion airports, flat agricultural fields, or even long straight highways. But out over the ocean, there are absolutely zero runways hiding beneath the waves. You are completely and utterly isolated. Because of the sheer isolation, the single most valuable resource in an emergency isn't extra fuel, and it's not even radio contact. It is altitude itself. Altitude literally buys you time. The higher up you are when an engine quits, the more distance you have to glide, troubleshoot the problem, and actually reach a usable airport. All right, let's look at ETOPS and engine failure, or how we actually engineer for this kind of isolation. Modern aviation definitely doesn't rely on luck to handle that isolation. It relies on ETOPS, which stands for Extended Range Twin Operations. You can think of this as the ultimate aviation stress test. It's a strict certification that dictates exactly how far a twin-engine jet is legally allowed to fly from the nearest diversion airport if one of those engines just totally gives out. It's pretty wild, but modern twin-engine aircraft are actually built, tested, and certified to survive up to 180 or even beyond 300 minutes on just a single functioning engine. That is up to 5 hours of flying time with half your thrust. But hitting that massive safety window requires starting from a higher, way more efficient altitude to absolutely maximize that glide distance. This naturally leads us into air density and fuel and the physics of finding that perfect sweet spot. Survival isn't the only reason pilots climb. Atmospheric physics actually heavily rewards it. Down low, you're dealing with high drag, but higher up, in those oceanic altitudes, low drag. As you climb, the air gets thinner, which creates significantly less friction. Over an 8 to 14-hour ocean crossing, shedding that drag translates into absolutely massive fuel savings. So, you might be wondering, if it's that efficient, why don't planes just fly this high over land all the time? Well, overland airspace is basically an obstacle course. You're dealing with heavy domestic congestion, super complex departure and arrival corridors for dozens of nearby airports, not to mention restricted military zones. Pilots simply do not have the freedom to climb to their maximum efficiency altitude because the sky is just too crowded. Domestic airspace operates on these stepped altitudes, kind of like layered highways so nobody bumps into each other. But cross the coast and you get wide open bands. The constant layered traffic and regional bottlenecks just vanish, giving pilots the absolute freedom to climb undisturbed into those clean, high-altitude efficiency bands. And hey, we definitely can't forget about the massive impact of the weather. Ocean currents and the jet stream absolutely dictate altitude. Climbing higher over the open water often lets planes soar safely above all those turbulent, ocean-driven wind currents. When you don't have an easy diversion airport to escape a bumpy ride, locking into a calmer, higher altitude band is an absolute priority for a safe crossing. Next up, let's talk about oceanic air traffic control and the invisible satellite grid. Managing commercial planes over the middle of the Pacific requires a totally different technological approach than managing them over, say, London. Over land, controllers use continuous real-time radar, which allows for very tight vertical separation. But over the deep ocean, radar simply does not reach. Controllers have to rely on satellite tracking, meaning position reports are actually spaced minutes apart. So what does that actually mean in practice? Well, reduced tracking inherently demands a much wider safety buffer. Because that real-time tracking is reduced to just periodic satellite pings, oceanic planes are given massive vertical separation. We're talking 1,000 feet or more between aircraft. To safely accommodate that wide spacing requirement, planes are naturally pushed up into higher, emptier altitude bands just to make enough room for everyone. Bringing it all together, we have the final calculation and how all this is quietly working in the background. Ultimately, altitude isn't just randomly assigned by a pilot hoping to give you a better view of the clouds. It's a meticulously calculated formula. Planes intentionally climb higher over the water to do 4 really crucial things. They maximize their glide distance for survival, achieve strict ETOPS safety windows, harvest incredible fuel efficiency in the thin air, and safely accommodate the wide spacing required by satellite air traffic control. So, the next time you're on a long flight and you see that little seatback altitude display quietly ticking higher and higher as you cross out over the water, remember this. Over the ocean, height isn't just about comfort. It is your ultimate survival margin. It is quietly working in the background, making absolutely sure you make it safely across the waves. Does knowing all that make you feel more secure? Or maybe just a little more aware of the invisible tightrope of modern aviation? I'll let you decide. Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and keep questioning the world around you.